Watch The Atheist Experience live Sundays at 4:30 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTAXP and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callaxp.
It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Secular Sexuality, the ACA show saying no thanks for all the thoughts and prayers. Keep them. My name is Christy Powell, and I'm joined again tonight by friend of the show and high priestess of the Church of Sexual Humanism. Welcome back, Shannon Q.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, always glad to have you. Always glad to have you. And I don't know, it's going to be, I don't want to say messy. I don't want to rush into it, but this is going to be kind of a bumpy conversation, I think.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I love complex conversations. So
yeah, well, let's see how we manage. We're, I guess, I'll tell the audience we're having kind of the same conversation tonight that you and your partner might be having about, you know, spending family, Christmas dinner, that whole situation. You know, that do we really have to? Who all's going to be there? Is it okay to leave early? Do they know what's going to happen if anybody brings up the red wave again? So give us a call with your stories and questions. We're at 512-991-9242 or tiny.cc/callsex because the show is coming right now. All right, you know the drill. What's got you turned on this week, Shan?
We just had a long conversation about books. So all of the books I'm reading.
Honestly, there were some exciting ideas in there, like hanging out with you and Malty and Kara and like so many of these people that are involved with the organization. I never get a chance to add anything new to my queue because it's so stacked.
I know. That's why I was just saying I'm reading 3 books simultaneously right now, depending on what my mood
Good on
is. One's like an apologetics book. There's one that I'm rereading. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow. The apologetics book I'm reading is The Experience of God. And I just started reading The Brain That Changes Itself for the first time. And that's a book about brain neuroplasticity. And I'm absolutely in love with it so far. So I'm reading 3 books right now. So right now, books are probably what's turning me on because that conversation got me really excited. Every time someone talks about books, I'm like, ooh, okay, can I add that to my Audible queue?
No, that'll work,
please.
That sounds like a interesting collection. Honestly, there is a episode of this show that's been germinating in my mind for a long time. So hit me up when you're done with it and let's talk about neuroplasticity.
Oh yeah, it's such a good book so far. Like I've studied brains for a very, very long time, both, you know, scholastically and recreationally, because I think it's fascinating. I don't know why more people aren't interested in it, really, to be honest, but there's so much that I didn't realize even about the history of the field of neuroplasticity and how it wasn't really accepted.
I mean, when I took like my Psych 101 classes, it was common knowledge. It was known that there was basically no neurogenesis, nothing to speak of.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And now that there's so much progression in the field of understanding like neuroplasticity, that there's so much new to learn just since I went to school that I haven't really delved into. So I'm really, really enjoying the book. I'm not knowledgeable enough to speak on it yet, but it's a type of book that while you're reading it, you're like looking up studies because you're like, oh, I want more of the background. Like it's taking me a while to read the book because I'm like, oh, who's that guy? I haven't heard of that guy. I need to go see what else he's done to see how that might feed into this. It's like a whole experience reading this book. It makes me want to learn more. That's a good book. It makes me want to learn more.
One of those Kindle reads where you have to be constantly like doing the long press in order to go to the Wikipedia page. I'm with you.
Use the highlighter, use the Post-it note. Make sure that you can come back to that page, bookmark it. Yeah, it's that type of book. I love it.
Yeah, well, I suppose we're both a little heady in what's got us turned on right now. I want to tell people about the movie Triangle of Sadness in theaters right now. There's the Palme d'Or film winner by Ruben Östlund. I know that for a lot of folks, none of the words that I just said meant anything at all, but I'm telling you, this is a weird, fun, exciting movie. If you have any sort of movie nerdness in you at all, this is absolutely worth checking out. It's a really bizarre conversation about labor and gender and about commodifying sex, and it's smart and interesting and silly and weird. I really want to encourage everybody listening to this to check it out if they can.
Oh, very cool. How recently did you see it?
Just this past weekend. This is my time of year. This is my season.
Okay.
Everybody gets all excited about the pumpkin spice latte and the leaves on the ground and these wonderful things. This is Oscar season. This is when all of the like really weird, heady movies are coming out, and I've been just living at the Draft House Theater.
Oh, that sounds really, 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 really exciting. So, like Paul, my partner who I live with, he's the same way. Every Oscar-nominated movie or potentially Oscar-nominated movie,
Oh, yep.
he wants to see it because he's a big movie guy. And I don't like a lot of media because I get easily bored and distracted. But I love esoteric films, and there's a lot of that this time of year because everybody's getting in under the wire for nominations. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I'll take that on board as an additional turn on. I'm allowed to.
Fair enough. Yeah.
No
well, and your brain really is your biggest erogenous zone, right? Like important to keep in mind.
I'd argue maybe the only one, really.
Hey, there you go. Well, so let's I guess gently tiptoe into it because I'll start by saying that in getting ready for this interview, I had kind of a different direction that we were maybe going to go because I have been fascinated by these arguments around like the 6 or 7 infamous passages in the Bible that mention homosexuality.
The clobber passages.
Yeah. I mean, and there is such a push, a movement to sort of explain those away as, it doesn't actually mean men who have sex with men. In the ancient languages, it actually referred to something else. And honestly, I kind of went back through those so that we could talk about them.
Okay.
And none of them were compelling to me, like whatsoever. And I didn't want to waste any more of our time with them tonight. So I guess the reason I'm bringing all this up is to just ask you, should we care? Like, is it shitty for atheists to just shrug off that ambiguity and let ancient poetry lie? Or should we be invested in how, potentially billions of people interpret what their God has to say about, the value and the rights of 20% of us?
I would say that we should care in so much as it impacts the actions of others towards that community and giving them compelling art. I'll share a little story, actually.
Yeah,
so
please.
There's a book called On Clobber, and the author's name is Colby. I can't remember Colby's last name. He's going to hate me because I actually know Colby. But I had a discussion with him, and he is a Christian, and his purpose in writing this book was to explain to other Christians, and I'm kind of on this team, like that you can still hold your beliefs without holding on to bigoted beliefs, without being a bigot, without negatively impacting other people. You can accept that is the case. That's the way God made people. And basically, like, leave them alone, incorporate them into the church even. Like, I think that is, ideally, I don't think that that's necessary. But given the alternative, I think that that's a wonderful thing, right? And so much so do I care that there's somebody in our life who is in the church, who's very deep in the church, means a great deal to him. And he's having a difficult time reconciling some of the stances that he's discovering in his church about people who are, gay and lesbians and trans. And he wants to start changing the minds of the people in that church. So we sent him that book. We're not going to, nor are we interested in, actively attempting to deconvert this person. But this will get
declaw him a little bit.
No, or even what I'm thinking too is that he wants to do good work within that church to change the paradigm so that the people within that church are no longer holding bigoted positions. Like they would still hold on to their religion, in all likelihood, but they wouldn't hold bigoted positions anymore. And that's a shift in the right direction. That's something.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that we should care. Sometimes you have to exist within that paradigm to at least get some small semblance of progress. You can't just expect it to go from 0 to 100.
Yeah. No, and I'm glad, I'm a little relieved even to hear you kind of take that stance. Only because like when I was writing this interview and kind of thinking about these questions and coming to my own conclusions, I think I started to feel a little bit militant because I do agree with you, and I do believe that a step in the right direction is a meaningful step, and that it doesn't need to be all or nothing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm at a place of frustration right now. Like you're, I mean, you're talking about this maybe like softer idea of Christianity or of some of these religious beliefs. And I guess I have to point out that, there's that old truism that the road to atheism is littered with Bibles that have been read cover to cover. And I think it's also fair to kind of point out that a lot of people in the church don't hold that like super dogmatic, literal, cover to cover biblical worldview. And I don't know if atheists choose to ignore that, because it definitely feels like we tend to believe that, okay, if you're going to say this book is real, then you have to be willing to defend everything in it. And I guess what I'm asking is, if theists don't necessarily buy into everything in that holy book, is it still valid for society to hold them accountable for every word in that book?
Yeah, I think so. Especially if you're evangelizing it, which Christians tend to do. If you're proselytizing in an attempt to get other people to buy into it,
even if you don't believe in the whole book, if you're telling other people how great this book is,
right?
Then yeah.
And I think that it would be like a form of ineptitude and negligence to try to convert somebody over to believing something you don't have a full understanding of, especially when that can propagate so much negative affect, like demonstrably so. It can propagate so much negative affect. So to that degree, I think we should care. And also, I don't think it's epistemically sound or good for people to have beliefs that are pulpit bred, as opposed to based on sound epistemic principles and their own attempts to acquire knowledge.
If you say you believe the Bible, you should study the Bible, understand the Bible, and believe the Bible, and not be, just taking your marching orders from somebody interpreting it for you, or any belief system. I mean, is that kind of how you mean it?
Yeah, I think any belief system would be. Yeah, I would extend that to everything. I think people should base their beliefs on sound epistemic principles, and that should be a goal. And it shouldn't just be, leave people alone if they're not doing too much harm or whatever. I think ultimately it's fair to question how people come to their beliefs. And if you care about how you come to your beliefs, which most people probably do, them being held to a healthy level of scrutiny should be something that you welcome, especially if you believe that they're the ultimate truth.
Sure.
Like they should withstand that.
Well, and in a marketplace of ideas, I feel like that is kind of where the ACA lives. And that's sort of the philosophy that we all espouse. Like, what do you believe and why? And can we talk about it? And if it can be destroyed by the truth, like all of these philosophies. But, in kind of day-to-day life, there is that challenge of, how do I not proselytize? How do I not try and push my atheist agenda? How do I, let other people have their beliefs, while knowing in the back of my mind that you give money to an organization or knowing that you honor and worship a book that includes a lot of these incredibly dehumanizing aspects of, people like me, people in my community. It's I don't know. It's a difficult challenge that I think comes up in particular this time of year. Is all that fair to say?
I think that's totally fair to say. And I think that you have a unique perspective on it too, if you're part of the group of people that is so systemically and frequently harmed by the people who are propagating that belief system. So I think sometimes it's very easy to say when when there's no impact to you directly that, like, leave well enough alone,
Sure. Yeah.
that like it's not worth the fight.
Can't we all just get along? And yeah, you believe
Right.
what you believe. Sure.
Well, it's very much worth the fight if you're the person on the other end of the sword, right? Like that's being like
Yeah.
constantly held up to you. It's worth fighting because then you're not just picking a fight, you're fighting back. That's the difference. You're defending yourself
Mm-hmm.
at that point. If you're not in a position where you have to consistently feel like you're defending yourself, it's easy for you to say, well, I choose my battles, or it's easy for you to say, oh, let people believe whatever they want to believe, or yada yada yada, or call atheists, or not even just atheists, there's Christians, deconverted and deconstructed, not deconverted, sorry, deconstructed Christians who are also in this sort of movement to sort of neuter the church when it comes to
Yeah.
their bigotry and their misogyny and their nationalism and their negative impact in general on overall society. So yeah, I think that it's easy to say leave well enough alone when you're not the one that's being bothered by what they're doing. It's not impacting you.
Yeah.
So
So
whole
it
different
becomes
perspective.
challenging then to think about like, well, what is impacting me and quote my community? The as more we like zoom out and start to think of things as a global community, we have to meaningfully be willing to consider the connection between the literal words of the Bible and like what happened at Club Q recently.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to point a specific finger, but I do think that there are interesting questions to be had. And at what point does pushing back make sense? Not trying to be violent or militant about it in the least bit. And I'm not trying to be casual in bringing up that notion of terrorism, but it's a very scary place to be walking right now.
Yeah, that didn't not contribute.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's basically no denying that. We see it being weaponized consistently. And just because there are people that aren't weaponizing it, that doesn't mean that it isn't a weapon, right?
Yeah, sure.
That could be picked up and wielded in that fashion and is quite frequently and demonstrably. So I hate the idea that you have to justify defending yourself, though.
Yeah. I
don't think
I
you should
hear
have
all
to.
of that, but I mean, I think when I guess what I am looking at is when we indulge or accept sort of the fringe aspects of Christianity, or like, I guess not the fringe, but like the softer exterior pieces, are we also inviting in the shitty stuff, the scary stuff, the bigoted stuff? And I know that that's a little bit of a naive question in some ways. But, I don't necessarily feel like we should be outside of shopping malls, like picketing Santa and Christmas tree displays on public grounds. But I'm at least concerned about us as atheists and how often we sort of like go along to get along, and whether or not there are places that we should be reconsidering those ideas.
I think that that's aiming your arrow at the wrong target, though.
Yeah.
Like,
How do you mean?
so if that's where you're expending your energy,
Mm,
is picketing like Santas and Christmas trees, because those are things that have kind of been appropriated by Christians as part of a
sure.
holiday.
Yeah.
They're not something like you're not going to find Santa or a Christmas tree in the Bible, right? Like those aren't the things that are being wielded in a harmful fashion and enacted in society in a harmful way. Those are things that people who aren't Christians even have an affinity for and a nostalgia surrounding.
Yeah.
So if that's where you're expending your energy, is trying to combat that something that's kind of innocuous and can almost be considered sort of like secular. Like I have a Christmas tree.
Yeah. I mean,
don't think
I've got
anybody
the green behind me and the red
Right.
sweater. Like I'll be drinking some eggnog after the show. Like, yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I don't think that that's a necessarily good way to expend your energy in combating religion, because in so much as we do combat religion, it should be because we want people to have sound epistemic reasoning, and attacking a Christmas tree is not going to do that. Or we want for them to stop harming people, and those are things that aren't harming people. So you're just kind of causing a scene at that point,
Mm-hmm.
about the wrong things and creating this sort of image that we're like, I think it kind of gives Christians the ammunition that, there's this war on Christmas, and
Right. Yeah.
and Christianity just in general is being
They're
taxed.
trying to destroy our entire way of life.
Right. Exactly. And it really doesn't matter. Like, whether or not somebody has a Christmas tree or there's a Santa in the mall isn't something that's even Christian specific in my mind.
Yeah. And I
with one of their
definitely,
holidays.
I definitely hear all of that. Is it, I guess it's fair to say then that the target isn't necessarily religion. It is the harm that is done by religion. And when we can remove all of the harm in the world done by all religions, and some hypothetical utopia, then whatever is left, whatever neutered belief system, if it exists at all, is something we don't have to stress about.
Yeah. It's my issue isn't people believing in deities. Like, that impacts me not at all in and of itself. It's all of the baggage that comes with the tenets of the faith that are packaged with that deity, and how those are enacted in that person's life and how they engage with the world. Those are the things that I have general issues with. And the only way to, and if you believe that that's ultimately truth, which they tend to, then the only way to shift them away from that is to show them which aspects of it aren't true, or that all of it isn't true. And sometimes that's iterative, and sometimes that happens all at once. Sometimes you're unlucky and it doesn't happen at all. But that's where, like, my goals lie. Maybe other people have different goals, but that's where my goals lie, is harm reduction. Like, overall harm reduction to the person holding the belief, and to what they do with that belief to other people.
Yeah. So I suppose that's framed. Yeah. No, I think that you've actually got a really good divining rod here of, the distress principle. Like, is this causing harm?
Right.
And that makes sense when we're talking about at least triaging sort of the atheist agenda. Like, where should we start first? It's not mall Santas. I absolutely agree. There are bigger fish to fry. But I think there is a different question when we're not talking about so much the things that we are actively dismantling and deconstructing, but rather the things that we are participating in. So, like, when it comes to paying polite lip service, bowing our heads at Christmas dinner while somebody says grace.
I don't do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think that that's fair. A lot of folks.
Because I think it's disrespectful to me to expect me to engage in your religious practice with you.
Yeah.
I will sit there quietly so that you can do it and not interrupt you, but I won't conform with you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find that disrespectful, if you find nonconformity disrespectful of me, that is a you problem. And I will not do it.
Yeah. Well, so I usually tell people that, if they get like asked by a family member to tag along on a family Christmas trip or a trip to a Christmas service or something, usually I just encourage them to honor their own trauma, right? To like prioritize their own comfort, to not feel obligated in that way. But if you enjoy the tradition of it, you grew up doing it, if you're okay and actually have a good time going to church once a year and singing some hymns, is there a moral component to that? Is that a form of, quote, like, collaborating in that type of participation?
I think that's a rocky road. I think that would depend on the church. Like, if it was an NIFB church, for example, I would say that's an absolutely 100% hard no. Like, I will not be seen in that building unless I'm causing a scene. Like, unless I am in there causing a scene, you won't see me in that church. But there's like there's United churches in Canada that are bordering on secular. I'd have no issue going into that church. Like, they're a super affirming church, accepts everybody. I'd have no issue going to that church, chatting with the people and sharing that experience with them, even though it's not something that I believed in. Would I go to a Catholic church? Don't think so. I don't think I would. I wouldn't feel comfortable sitting idly while they pass around a collection plate, knowing everything that happened in the residential school system here in Canada and knowing everything that has happened to all of the children who that institution has harmed, knowing the history of that institution. I wouldn't feel comfortable. I would feel as though I was passively compliant and complicit in a space that has been used for insurmountable amounts of harm.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't feel comfortable, but would if somebody else was there because their family has this tradition and it means a lot to them as a family, and they're there because they want to be with their family and still have that shared experience. Even though would I come at them? No, I wouldn't. That's my choice. I don't get to make that choice for them.
Yeah, so it becomes you have to draw the line somewhere. But do you have any thoughts, any tips, any advice for how to draw that line? I think we can start with like what I was saying about, make sure that you are taking care of yourself and
For sure.
not feeling obligated or, having this like undue duty to honor your parents or whatever, even if it's causing you a lot of harm.
Yeah.
But outside of that, in terms of like when we are potentially collaborating or participating in putting, evil out into the world, however we want to frame it, how do you draw that line?
I think that's a hard question.
Yeah.
Like it really is, because I haven't really thought about how to articulate where my line is. I think it's something that's just tacit to me, if that makes sense. Like if somebody asked me to go to one church or another, it might have to do with the amount of harm I feel. That might be the locus of my decision.
Yeah.
Is if I feel that my presence would make me complicit in an institution that has done a significant amount of harm. That would probably be my line. But
And we have to participate in these institutions on some level all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Like at least
but
here
not all
in
of
the
that
States.
is voluntary.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, at least here in the States, it is basically impossible to vote for any major candidate that isn't at least nominally religious.
Yeah.
And even if we, I don't necessarily care about your personal beliefs, I just want you to do a good damn job.
Yeah.
I know that I now have to watch like footage of you going to mass in order to, it's just part of the system. And it's frustrating. I get that we can't entirely opt out of these things. It's tricky to know, though, where to draw those lines.
Well, I think me attending a church service is something that's entirely voluntary. And me not going doesn't harm anybody, makes me feel like I'm not being complicit. And maybe it does boil down to feelings in that instance, because my presence there really doesn't have any impact one way or the other. That church is still operating if I'm sitting there quietly or not in the building. Right?
I haven't contributed in that sense.
Right, exactly. It's just a personal principle, I think. But when it comes to something like voting, especially in the States, I don't think it's the same type of choice, because no matter what, everybody around you, or at least hopefully a large number of people around you, are going to be voting. And regardless, there's going to be an outcome, right? You can either contribute to that outcome or not. And if the two choices are on the table and one is exceptionally horrible and demonstrably like dystopian nightmare level bullshit, and the other one, I mean, sucks, but probably isn't going to take away everybody's rights.
So you do watch American politics. You do know who the candidates are.
I do. Like, it's hard to, like, I understand some of the people that say, well, I don't want to participate in the system at all, then I don't want to vote because I hate both of these choices.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is somebody's getting elected, whether you like it or
Let's
not.
make peace with
whether
that.
you like the choices or not, somebody's getting elected. And if you abstain from that is, to my mind, almost complacency, right? Because you're taking away what tiny smidgen of effect you could have on that outcome, and just not exercising it at all whatsoever, which likely you would have probably voted for the lesser of two evil candidates, which means that that's one less vote that person gets, which means that's kind of one more vote for that
Contributing
person.
to
Like
the
you could
greater
have
evil.
closed the, you
Yeah.
could have closed
Utilitarianism
the
is
gap.
tricky, right?
Yes, it is. But I mean, I get it. I empathize with the situation because, I mean, both of your political parties are like your whole political system is, and the fact that you even just have two parties, like we have so many parties
We're
here that we
so
can't even
proud of
tell
the
are
fact that we
coordinated.
invented it too. Like we invented it in the first place, got it right the first time. No need to innovate whatsoever.
Yeah, that's right. Everything's perfect. That Constitution has never changed and should never change,
Not
except
just
for all
perfect,
those
but
amendments.
exceptional.
Yeah, I don't know. So I guess all that is to say, I don't think it's the same type of choice.
Yeah, fair to say.
I don't know. Maybe you see it different.
No, I think that you have the right of it. We do have something of an obligation to participate to the betterment. And yeah, it is very different when you have the option to opt out without potentially causing harm. But man, is it tricky when this stuff is just all around us all the time. And I guess that's why, especially with, it being the Christmas time of year, when we start to see this, I know it's not just a religious holiday, but we really do endure hearing religious hymns on car commercials in ways that we really don't have to deal with at other parts of the year. So it's a lot. We're going to keep diving into it. But first, let's take a moment and talk to Stephen in Arizona, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Stephen, what can we do for you tonight?
Well, I wanted to thank you, first of all, for taking my call. And I apologize in advance as I jump around with pronouns a little bit as I describe what I'm going through. I am an atheist. I am part of the LGBT community myself. I identify as pansexual, I guess. And I have a friend who has recently transitioned. And when we met, she was lesbian. And we were like the little LGBT leaders at our place of work. We made everybody go to the 8th walk and do things like that and become socially aware. And in the last couple of years, she became he. And I've struggled. I've really struggled with not so much accepting that she is now he, but what to do with my memories and how I interact with this person. Because it's not, I have a lot of friends who have, for some reason, now have LGBT children that have all come out to them, and they send them to me like I'm going to know everything about everything. And
Sure. I hear that.
I know the line about, I know the difference between sex and gender and sexuality, and I know all the different words. I just said I identify as pansexual. I probably better identify as demisexual, and then I'm just kind of all over the place. I like that the kids keep coming up with new words. I try to stay on top of it. And I remember with one of my kids, who comes to me is non-binary, and they were like, Mom is having such a hard time with this because they had renamed themselves to better align with who they felt they were. And I said, first of all, your mom sent you to me. She loves you. She is trying as hard as she can to get her head around this. And when she looked at you, when she gave birth to you and picked out your name, she had all these images of what you were going to grow up to be. So give her some time, because the fact that you and I are even having this conversation means she loves you. So I can have those conversations with other people's kids, even with other people. But when it comes to this friend of mine, I remember, when we met, we traveled together. She lived with me briefly when she was between apartments. And then now she's he. And I still love this person. Let me be very, very abundantly clear, but it's hard for me not to call him by the quote unquote dead name, which really hurts me to say. Both that I had trouble with it, but also I don't like the term dead name. I understand where it comes from, but she's not dead. She is now, I like the idea of caterpillar to butterfly kind of idea, that she is now he. But I struggle with it so much because I worry about using the wrong name, using the wrong pronoun. referencing a memory that I'm not clear on whether that's like I went through this transition with him in a sense, but I don't know how he feels about his old life and where our memories fit in. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
I hear you. And I guess I have to point out that when we see a butterfly, we don't call it a caterpillar. And we might talk about its like previous state, but we still are referring to it as a butterfly. Or maybe a better metaphor is when, particularly if a woman gets married and chooses to take her husband's last name, even when we're talking about memories of that person from long before they met their spouse, we usually would refer to them by that new name, right? Like if I were to talk about where Hillary Clinton went to college, I wouldn't need to call her Hillary Rodham, even though she wasn't married at that point. And I guess I just point out that linguistic piece because I feel like it's part of what is maybe tripping you up here. And I hear you, feeling frustrated with yourself and these different things. And I might really encourage you to think of that person that you went to college with, that you've known for all this time, as a he, and to start thinking of them as that new name and recognize that it wasn't a she that became a he. Gender fluidity is its own thing, and potentially we could have that discussion, but in all likelihood, what I'm imagining is that this is a he who's always been a he, but perhaps did not know that yet or did not express that in that way. Does that feel fair at all?
Yeah, I think where I'm worried, and I heard everything you said, and it was beautifully put. Not that you need compliments, but but it's the idea that he was in pain before. And I don't know if being her was painful, whether there was inadvertently pain I contributed to. I want him to be as happy as he's been since becoming he. And I love him. I really do. And I miss, we live now in different parts of the country, so we don't see each other very much. I miss spending time with him because nobody made me laugh harder. But I worry, it's to your point about, whether it's a name change for marriage or we don't think of the caterpillar. Hillary Rodham wasn't going through pain for being Hillary Rodham. And the caterpillar wasn't in pain for being a caterpillar, where I don't always feel like that's the same situation for people who gender transition. They're in pain until they figure it out, in a lot of my experience or reading and, gossiping.
Are you worried that your memories, your positive memories are painful ones for him? And that reminiscing with him is going to elicit pain for him, even though it's nostalgia for you and you're not sure how to traverse that?
Absolutely. I'll give you a quick story. So we went on vacation to Arizona before I moved here, and we were picked. We got a door prize to go to get a spa treatment. Mm-hmm. And when we went to the spa, they assumed that she was my spouse and kept referring to her as Mrs. Last Name. And it was driving her up the wall. Now, to me, it was just funny because, I'm focused on men, she's lesbian, and that part of it was just funny to me because it was just assumed that because we were there together that we must be a married couple. And she was really like driven up the wall. So to me, it's funny. And to her, now him, I don't know if like a memory like that would have been, don't they see me? Don't they realize who I am? That kind of piece of it. Or that I didn't even notice with the kids that I deal with and being so involved with my community at that time and the diversity of LGBT people in my life at that time, that I didn't see anything coming from her that suggested that there was some other layer to this going on. She seemed like a perfectly happy lesbian to me, butch, but sorry for anybody who hates that term, but I'm old. But, very happy lesbian. So I really I was really floored. In fact, when she first told me, I thought it was a joke. That she was, it's like, well, yeah, you cut your hair short and you like wearing flannel, but I don't think that means anything, was joking. And then it was like, no, I'm now this person and I'm he. And it was like, whoa, where did that come from? That kind of a feeling.
Probably a
And,
lot of self-exploration and a hard
A
introspection
lot of personal work. Yeah.
yeah, it's probably where that came from.
Yeah.
So if this person, if he's somebody who's a close friend of yours and you've had an existing relationship with that was close and open, it sounds like you're projecting a lot about what you're afraid he might think or what aspects of your relationship may have been incidentally harmful in the past and how that's going to impact you now. You may benefit from having a conversation like this with him, like, and letting him know that you care about him as much now as you did then in all of the same ways. And if there was part of that journey he didn't feel like he could share with you then for whatever reason, you're open to explore those feelings with him now and start building new memories with who he is, who he's always been, now that he's instantiated himself as himself. And then you don't have to have the anxiety surrounding what he might think, because you will know what he does think and involve him in the conversations about him that you've been having in your mind. It may help assuage some of this. It may build you a stronger relationship, and it may give him an even more important confidant and friend than he had in you in the past. It may reincarnate that relationship into something even more beautiful and something even more meaningful now that he's in the next stage of his life. And you can go with him.
Yeah, and Stephen, if I may, it would not be unreasonable for you to have some anxiety about having that conversation or asking these questions, in part because you're afraid of the answer. Because it hurts to think back on those positive memories and to recognize that they may or may not have been the same experience for somebody that you care about. I'm with Shannon. I think that clearing up some of that ambiguity, opening that door, having that conversation has real value. But I just want to give you permission to have feelings about that. You're still responsible for your actions, right? You're still responsible to see this person as who they are telling you they are, to meet them in that, to move forward with them, to be respectful in the way that you speak to them and about them, and all of these different things. But if you have some discomfort, some sense of sorrow over that pain, that's okay. That makes you human, and you don't need to apologize or try and bury that emotion in order to make sure you're getting the right pronoun and all of those kinds of things. I don't know that those two things are necessarily connected.
That's fair.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I think you're right. A lot of it is just fear about having that conversation. But thank you for your insights. I do very much appreciate it and enjoy your program very much.
I can tell you care about him, Stephen, and I hope that everything works out and that you journey together into an even more beautiful and fruitful relationship than you had prior, and you have a long, happy friendship.
So say we all. Yeah.
Thank you, Christy.
You're welcome.
Okay. Take care.
Have a good rest of the day.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you, you too.
And
That's so genuine.
Yeah, and these conversations are hard enough in a beautiful world of different types of people meeting and bouncing off of each other and loving each other, and the people you lose along the way. There's so much complexity to that sorrow without adding in a culture that is just so violent and aggressive and works so hard to make the experience of trans folks so often sorrowful that, Stephen could almost just assume that it's there.
Yeah. Like if you could take all of that aspect away from it, like how society makes everything about transition and finding out who you are away, and just focus on that, an analogy that helped me when I was first kind of learning my way through this is, as a mom, I know what it's like to kind of lament that I will never have my son as a baby again. I know what it's like to lament that I'll never have him as a toddler again. But that doesn't take away from how excited and happy I am to see who he is now. Like,
Mm.
I don't want that back, because that means I would give up now. And now, like, now is amazing. Every day I get to watch him become a better, more him version of him than he was the day before. And that's exciting. That's wonderful. Him finding himself and becoming more of himself is wonderful and beautiful. That is what it's all about. But it's still valid to have feelings of, oh, I miss when he was little and I could just hold him.
I hadn't heard that comparison. I think that's beautifully said. I might be tempted to trade in my teenager for like the earlier version, but
he's 11. I haven't hit that yet. You'll talk to me again in 3 years. I may have a different story. There may be a different story coming into my mouth in 3 years than ours right now.
Sure. Well, we've got another call on the line, but first let's take a quick look at what's been going on around the rest of the ACA. And you meet the most interesting, wonderful people doing this kind of work. You really do. I mean, I could be doing a show about accounting, I guess, or something. So glad to be here talking about sex dolls and all kinds of wildness with y'all.
And this one says, ex-Christian Erin is just one X away from Pornhub. Maybe then she can get out of the garage on those cold nights. Now, first of all, I choose to be in my garage. That is my studio.
They even elected a conservative culture warrior to become the president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And he's from the Archdiocese of the Military Services, because there's nothing better than a warrior for Jesus to lead us, right? Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition.
Your God created me to not believe in your God. So your God created me to burn. So your God created me solely for the purpose of being tortured for all of eternity. Yes or no?
Correct. I think you have it correct.
Cool.
Disagree.
Your God can eat my shorts.
You're avoiding the point because you don't want to address the Bible and its views on genocide. So instead you decide to bring trans people into this. Do you really think that trans people are on par with the evil of genociding a population?
It says, Dan smells. John probably smells. In parentheses, I have no idea. MD Aware is unaware that he smells. Erin used to smell, but only after being shamed into bathing, which she does reluctantly.
Hey.
Okay, jumping in with Randy in New York. Randy, talk to us about family and the holidays. What's on your mind tonight?
Hi, Christy. Hi, Shannon. Good to be on the show again. I've called before. Yeah. So I'm kind of talking, like listening to your topic of conversation before, and talking about, you mentioned about navigating, getting together with family during the holidays, and I've kind of refused to do that. I just kind of hang out alone, and I get harassed a little bit about that, and people are like, oh, but family is family, and blah, blah, blah. And I just don't, I didn't grow up in this country, so the family I have here are not family that I grew up with, so I just don't feel the need, but I still get harassed about it. And especially because I don't believe that, like, I don't believe in just, oh, let's go keep it civil, and we'll not talk about politics, and we'll not talk about these things to keep it so. I can't resist. I'm Gen X. I just like, no. So, I'm not going to convince anyone. And I think part of the problem, and I think it's kind of associated with you guys were talking about, like, should we just let go that they're like religious people, even though they don't embrace the more, I guess, toxic and extreme views of the religion, but should we just let it go and let people be? And I think your inclination was like, no, we should care about that. But I think part of the problem is in deeper, and that's deeper, like that's part of like my problem with the family, is that the level of discourse, the level of methodology, like skepticism, is just very low with in general, and in my family, or like in my American family, and also in general with the general population. It's just like I'm not that convinced that these direct engagements can be that productive. I think the more productive side would be just trying to, people learn how to engage in a more reasonable manner.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, don't debate politics with family over the holidays. Like, if somebody wants to have a conversation, if somebody is interested in hearing your point of view, if iron can sharpen iron, forgive me for that one. Like, feel free to talk through some of those ideas. But yeah, it's not. There's so many better ways to spend everybody's time. So I think it comes down to go to this holiday celebration if or because you enjoy it, because it's fulfilling, because it helps meet your needs or the needs of people that you care about. It's not an obligation, and it's definitely not something you should do if it makes you miserable. So I don't know if this is exactly what you were looking for, Randy, but I guess I just want to give you permission to go or not go as meets your needs.
Yeah, I understand that, because I have the same thing. Like, I have people from high school that also kind of want to engage, and I just I'm Gen X. I'm almost a boomer, but I'm Gen X. But I'm just like, the older I get, the more, I guess, liberal I get. Like, regarding politics, the sexuality, the relationship with the LGBTQ community is just like way to the left that anyone in my high school is and they still have sexist views. And my sister is like, well, but you don't have to talk. He's like, but they do talk about it. They talk about I grew up in Colombia, and in Colombia, the laws, and I don't know if you know this, but the laws protecting people of the LGBT community, transgender people, are pretty solid, much better than in the U.S. And actually, we have a Supreme Court ruling that basically decriminalizes abortion up to 24 weeks because of activism. But the actual implementation and the actual attitude of the general population is really negative, and there's the murder rate of transgender people is very high. So when I go and meet my ex-classmates from high school, they actually don't talk they're not that their ideas and their feelings about, for instance, just the transgender community are not
good by the sounds of it.
They're not
Yeah,
bad.
I hear that.
I'm not going to shut up. I'm just not going to shut up.
Don't go.
I'm not gonna
Doesn't sound like a good way to spend your time.
So I don't want to be friends with these people. As I tried to explain to my sister, I just prefer to be in spaces where maybe I can educate people. Like, for instance, what you guys do here, when in the SecX experience, even though there's exchanges, but I think the people watching are learning to think. Learning to oh, wait a minute, this is kind of the way we can.
There are better places to be an activist than across the table from your family. I definitely think that that's true. So,
and you don't owe anybody your emotional energy either.
Yeah,
and people attempting to convince you or manipulate you into giving your emotional energy and expending your emotional energy in areas of your life with people who you don't want to expend it on can in some instances be a form of manipulation and abuse if it's
for sure
enacted too strongly. If people are trying to attempt to make you feel guilt and shame for not affiliating with people that you don't deem worth your affiliation, or you deem as having a negative impact on your emotional state, that's not healthy. So I'm going to do what Christy does and say, I give you permission to not have to feel that guilt and shame, because you owe nobody your emotional energy. That is yours to give to whom you and when you choose. It's not up to anybody else. It is only up to you. No one else gets to make that decision for you or feel bad because you didn't make the decision that they wanted you to make about what you do with yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just, yeah, because my job is like, I like my job, but I work. Part of my job is dealing with minority communities, and some of them are, you know, the LGBTQ community, transgender, and it's a tough job. It's emotionally like draining. I don't need the holidays to be the same thing. Like, you know, I choose to invest my emotions in my job and the people that I serve in my job. I don't want to invest like make that investment in in toxic family or friend relationships. That's a bad investment in my opinion.
You deserve self-care. You deserve self-care. Use that time to replenish yourself. If you're consistently expending a high degree of emotional energy in your job as well, if that's very taxing, then you shouldn't feel obligated to make a choice that's going to tax you more. That can cause serious physiological damage in the long term, not let alone mental damage. You should utilize that time to replenish. Do things that fill up your tank. Self-care. That is a valid way, a justified way to spend your time, and you don't need anybody's permission to do it. You just need to give yourself permission and let go of any guilt that other people have given you. That guilt doesn't reside within you naturally. That is guilt that people are attempting to give you. Just don't accept it.
Yeah, imagine how different the new year could feel if everybody who felt forced or pressured to spend miserable time with family over the holidays instead had the opportunity to meditate and do yoga and watch their favorite movie over and over and over. So yeah, Randy, I hope that you will contribute to I guess the bettering of the overall mood of our country and of our culture by taking good care of yourself this season.
100%.
Or spending it with our sometimes we create our own families in our community.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Fair to say.
Like close friend.
Fair to say. Well, I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that whatever traditions, whatever you enjoy doing this time of year, however you like to spend your days off, that it's fulfilling and that it is easy to just be present in those moments, to enjoy yourself, and to not agonize over the people who are meeting across town who are wrong about a thing, because it can be really tempting to get mixed up in those fights. And I just hope for the best for you rather than all of that antagonism.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. Like very kind words. And yes, thank you very much.
Enjoy your holiday.
Take care.
Yeah, you guys do.
Well, right at the buzzer there. Well, I am actually really interested to hear your thoughts on this, Shannon, after everything we've talked about so far, because a couple of years ago, I was offered a board seat by a Christian charity here in town that wanted like a representative from the atheist community. They kind of pitched it to me as a way of sort of looking out for the atheist folks. And I agonized over it. I eventually bailed on it because I couldn't help but feel like I was just propping up a broken institution. But they're perhaps the first place that I really encountered like a detailed assessment of those 6 clobber verses and how it could be interpreted in a different way. And I don't know. I look back on it and I wonder if I could have done something to perhaps help neuter some of the anti-queer sentiments in the religious community in this area. That might be naive, but what do you see as sort of the moral imperative around all this?
I think some of the people who are in the best position to do work to bring people within the, Christian paradigm more towards, sort of humanist type principles are the people who are within the church, right? So I think sometimes we can be too staunch in thinking that it's all or nothing, right? Like if we participate in this organization at all, then that's the same as being complicit in other things that they or other places like them do with the book that they all build their buildings around. It's something I would probably antagonize over too, but ultimately I think that I might have at least given it a try.
Sure.
Because
what
if
kind
we
of
were,
impact can you have? What would it look like to participate in that system?
it's a lot easier to do work when you're at the table than it is screaming at the building from the outside. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they offered me a seat at the table and I had an opportunity to actually converse with and get in the ear of and present things to the people who are in a position to make decisions, that I think could be demonstrably more impactful than just wholly abstaining.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people may think I'm wrong, and I'm willing to be wrong and change my position on that. But
I do think that there are situations where you would be right, and it might be worthwhile
it's
to
contextual for
investigate
sure.
that. Yeah. So can you try it out for a week and
Yeah.
see what their priorities really are? Like, can we
Right.
descend into the particulars and be, looking at the specifics?
Yeah, exactly. Like giving it a try, I don't think would necessarily hurt because they're still gonna carry on without you,
Sure. Yeah.
right? There's still that whatever work that they were doing is still gonna take place. It's just gonna take place without external input.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing saying that once you get in, if you find out, okay, this actually, they're not listening to me, I'm being tokenized, yada yada yada, all of the negative things that could potentially happen, or not, or now I'm in a position where I can't affect things and I don't like what they're doing and feel like I need to say something about it. All of those things could happen and you can walk away then. But I would hate to relinquish a potential opportunity because I'm worried that the outcome is going to be negative before I even know that that's the case.
Yeah. Let's have some curiosity and not
Yeah.
be so averse to getting our hands dirty that we never actually even walk to the table.
Yeah. Or just like othering them so much that you just label all Christian bad.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the type of thing we don't want them doing, but we're engaging the same sort of mental schema building.
Yeah, no, I mean the bigotry component here is very nuanced and complicated because
sure.
we are responding to bigotry, right? If Christianity was entirely neutered, and I know we're really focusing on that particular belief system, but as we talk about the LGBTQ aspect and the Christmas aspect, it feels significant to point out that we are responding sort of defensively. But that can very quickly turn into just a flame war back and forth.
Yeah. It's so nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
I think people would like it to be, and in some instances, I would like it to be. It's just like so black and white that it's like them and people like them are bad. Us and people like us are good. We're doing the good stuff to the bad people. We shouldn't affiliate with them. We should just completely divorce ourselves from any sort of affiliation. Stay with the people who are like us that are good, and then just do our best to convince everyone else that those people over there are bad.
They're the bad ones.
Right.
Yeah.
I struggle to see what that ultimately accomplishes.
Sure. Well,
aside from creating factions.
Yeah. Well, and as we are moving from like a personal level to an institutional one, what kind of guidelines make sense? Like, I'm not asking you to set policy for the ACA or anything, but they're kind of rules that you might put in place that feel appropriate for an organization like ours when we have the opportunity to work hand in hand with a religious institution.
Yeah, no, I don't think that it's necessarily just flat bad. To do it. I don't. I sometimes find myself sliding, and I'm actively working nowadays more and more and more to be less dogmatic in my principles, because I sometimes get so mad because I see the harm that I can get blinded by the rage about it, and I can overextend that rage and blanket it over more people than deserve it. And then that creates isolationism, right? Like I end up becoming an island that doesn't actually accomplish my goals. We're not realistically going to eliminate religion or Christianity. That is that's not only a lofty goal, it's an unreasonable one. It's not going to happen.
Would you
There's a
say, just very quickly, within our lifetimes or at all?
I think within our lifetimes for sure. At all, I mean, I could see a time in the future where there maybe isn't Christianity. Could we eliminate the concept of religion at all? No, I think that kind of develops organically
Baked
within
into the human
society.
psyche?
Yeah, I think that somewhat develops organically because we're sort of pattern seeking and explanation making machines, and sometimes when there isn't an explanation, we engage in magic thinking, and that just naturally kind of forms cohesive groups around magic beliefs. I think that's just a thing that happens. But like back to what I was saying earlier, though, is I think that the most productive thing to do is reformation. If your goal is harm reduction, actively partnering with people who are interested in reformation in amongst that group as it exists now will bring people to deconstruct their religious beliefs more and the impacts that they have on themselves and others, and make them less harmful and more innocuous. And I don't think that we should turn our nose up in all instances. There's absolutely instances where we should. My God, there are. Like I said, I wouldn't walk into the NIFB and be like, I wouldn't walk up to Greg Locke and be like, we should do something together. Like, that's insane. That is insane. But that's the problem, is that all Christians aren't Greg Locke. Some of them are your mom and your dad, who are lovely people. Some of them are your brothers and your sisters and your next door neighbors. And they're good people who have good ideas, who maybe go to a church and maybe can spread some of those good ideas to the other people that are sitting next to them, so that the people in the people aren't taking the damaging ideas that they're hearing from the pulpit, if they are, and then spreading them around, right? Like, exposure to people like us is what
Part
can
of
help
that
people
process.
not feel so insular and definitively right, because now that they've enacted with us, that elicits dissonance. I don't know. I could go on about this for a while. I'm super passionate about this lately, if you can tell.
No, I mean, it feels like it's becoming more and more relevant in so many ways. I mean, the overall trend is, towards less religion, fewer theists, more nuns.
Yeah.
But right now, the pushback and the vitriol around that really feels like it's increasing.
Yeah, I think so. Like, the more and more I'm asking myself, like, why am I doing this? Right? Like, what are my goals? And I'm all about your actions aligning with your intentions. And if I'm going to be a public activist, if I'm going to be somebody who's sitting on YouTube all the time talking about why I don't believe in God, why am I doing that? What is that for? And the answer I come to is almost always harm reduction. And Christians are people too, right? I don't want them being harmed by bad beliefs. Everybody knows somebody who's got severe religious trauma, like, or
I mean, how many of the people? Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, how many of the people that you and I volunteer with, how many of the people who are on the crew or are hosts on the ACA networks are people who were religious at one point and made that change? I mean, certainly myself. So yeah, we're all people too.
Hands up. And if somebody just turned their nose up at me and walked away, right, then I wouldn't have had the opportunity to like slowly climb my way out of it, which is what we want, right? We want people to deconstruct. We want people to have better epistemology. We want people to enact less harm. We want people to be better versions of themselves and be happier. And most of the people that we want that for are currently religious. So calling them dumb and calling them mentally ill and saying that everybody like them is a bigot before we even know what they actually believe as a blanket statement is not an effective way to enact that goal, to my mind.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that that's fair to say. And, to your point, if a church takes up a donation and wants to donate that to some fund to support the survivors of the victims of something like the Club Q massacre, I do think that we're allowed to accept that donation, but we can be critical about it too, right? Like if it's coming from the Westboro Baptist Church, maybe we can go ahead and turn that donation around. So it's not necessarily fair then to draw a straight line from like buying cookies at a church bake sale all the way to domestic terrorism.
Right.
But I do worry about the little ways in which we are just so enculturated to normalize and accept these aspects of Christianity that we don't push back in ways that maybe we should. I mean, do you feel like that's true at all?
I agree. We push back all the time. We host call-in shows.
Yeah. Well,
go
yeah,
on
you and I
Twitter
do.
and Facebook and YouTube and do that stuff, right? But I think that interaction with people in the faith doesn't mean acceptance of everything that they believe,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that there's room
Love
for
the
both.
theist, not the theism. Yeah, can we do that?
That's a shirt. Love the theist, not the theism. That yes, yeah. I think that that's right, though, right? Like, just you don't have an opportunity to effectively point out that somebody is engaging in harmful beliefs that either hurt themselves or others, or that maybe their epistemic strategies and how they're employed throughout their life are ineffective, and that's resulting in them having other horrible beliefs like anti-vax and climate change. Like all of those stem from poor epistemologies that are the result of us accepting things from authority, or accepting things because we see them more broadly accepted, or because we have sort of like a combative stance against trust in authority sometimes. Like all of those things are a result of poor epistemology. We can't just tell somebody they're wrong and dumb and have that impact them in a way that's going to change that epistemology for the better for them, and then ultimately society, because those poor epistemologies are what lead to this sort of dystopian wasteland that we have right now. It makes people susceptible to coercion. It makes them susceptible to manipulation. It makes them susceptible to more bad beliefs, and them being entrenched in this sort of like crowd conformist insular thinking. But we can't impact it, I don't think, as effectively and I'm not saying we have to do it. I guess I'm mostly saying that we shouldn't vilify people who try to do it as though they're colluding with an enemy. And I get why you would, especially if you are so drastically harmed that that person or that group and people like them mean harm to you. Like, exposure to that is a trigger for severe trauma, and people like that are still at you all of the time, actively attempting to ruin your life. So when you see somebody who should ostensibly be your ally and on your side, conversing with in a matter that isn't just saying, hey, fuck you, everybody like you sucks, it seems like they're not on your team. Right? It seems like they're not, doing what they need to do to defend you and protect you. But the only way to defend people and protect them en masse is to work towards broader societal change. And you can't do that by creating factions. I just don't think. It doesn't mean everybody has to. You should protect yourself first. Like, only do what's right for you. Like I said, don't expend you don't know anybody your emotional energy. But sometimes people have the best of intentions, and those are the types of things that are actually going to be impactful and enact that long-term change, I think. Or at least it's one of the strategies that will, because it takes a multitude, but I think that is one of the strategies that will. I've thought about it a lot. I'm open to a lot of feedback about it, though, because I'd like to challenge my epistemology so that I can make sure that what I'm thinking is right. That's the best. So
Right.
I'm interested in reading the comments later to see what people think.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. It sounds like your philosophy is we have to draw a line. And, whenever that question comes up, the answer is always going to be somewhere, right? Like we can't necessarily say from here exactly where that line is drawn, but you're saying that we can't just do it in a two-box system. We have to see it as a spectrum. We have to be willing to perhaps get our hands dirty. And part of that is going to mean that if we're making these judgment calls, that we may have poor judgment. And that's not the goal. But if you're not willing to say, oh, it's definitely this or it's definitely that, and willing to take on that more nuanced worldview, then you have to also accept the fact that you are going to make mistakes, or you are going to change your beliefs, or maybe regret something that you've done, and that you may disagree in the future with some of your decisions. You may disagree with other people's decisions, and they may disagree with yours. And man, it starts to get so murky so fast, and it can feel really gross to have that doubt in yourself when you've been suffering from the other side of that argument.
Yeah, I think that's all fair to say. And I don't think that there's any one way to do it too. Like, we'd all like it to be so clear that this is the path. I don't think it's a path. I think it's many paths. Some of them are dead ends. Some of them are end in a dumpster fire. But like, we have to start trying to traverse them. I don't know. It's just so frustrating, especially when I watch what's happening in the States. I get so goddamn mad.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on with like your legislation down there? And I fear and feel it encroaching upon Canada. Sometimes.
I appreciate that. I mean, we're still holding out for y'all to basically do the Handmaid's Tale thing, where you come and rescue all of us if anything, goes wrong. So I'm going to need you to hold down that fort, because it is getting a little scary down here.
I'm trying, yeah.
I also have to just briefly acknowledge that I've been doing a few interviews like this recently with folks who are up in Canada. And as somebody who was raised as a backwoods, rural Texas conservative Christian, the notion of a Canadian being like, "Are you guys okay down there? Like, is everything all right?" Like, the idea
how'd you go that?
Yeah, I mean, we have the greatest country in the world. Like, we're exceptional. Everything we do is perfect. Why would anybody have concern for it? Oh, wait, okay. Maybe that was the indoctrination. It is, it's jarring to recognize just how deeply embedded those ideas can be.
There's like nobody that loves the smell of their own farts more than Americans. I swear to God.
Yup. Yeah, we're convinced we have it all figured out.
Yeah.
Everybody else has more vacation time, has easier access to medical. I mean, on and on and on and on. But we're doing it right. We would never want to look like them damn Europeans.
I got my son a prescription that cost me $5 on an app on my phone that put me directly into contact with a nurse practitioner for free.
Meanwhile, I was talking to folks before the show about how there was a paperwork snafu, and my partner and I, who have insurance and who switched from one insurer to another, because of that snafu, we were basically double covered and paying double premiums, and yet can't get either company to pay for anything. And that's the American worldview. And I think that ties into a lot of what we're talking about with regards to the way Christianity is influenced by and influencing the political situation right now.
Yeah. Like, I want the best for y'all. I really do.
I do appreciate that.
I really do. I care about way too many Americans. You guys need to be okay.
Yeah.
It needs to change.
Well, it feels important then to use this as a moment to point people towards things like recovering from religion, or I really want to recommend the book Leaving the Fold by Marlene Winnell. And honestly, anything that offers people peace when they are kind of struggling with those symptoms of religious trauma syndrome. Is there anything that you might recommend for this time of year?
I always go with recovering from religion.
Sure.
Like, everything in recovering from religion, like the Secular Therapy Project, I think is a beautiful thing. You know how much I hate Christian counselors. Like, I really hate them. Like, I wouldn't volunteer for their board.
I mean, I graduated with a bunch of them. I'll tell you what, the greatest thing I can say about Christian counselors is that whenever I start to have imposter syndrome, or I start to wonder about my skills or my capabilities, I just remember all the people I went to college with at a Christian university. I'm like, you know what? I'm I'm doing
all right
okay.
there,
I'm doing all
Christy.
right.
You're doing fine. I've been listening to a lot of John Street lately. Do you know who John Street is?
Not familiar myself.
Oh, okay. So he is the head of the Christian counseling department at a university that is called the Masters University. And I hate him. He's the worst person.
So you got to draw a line somewhere, and your line has John Street on
that
this
is
side
that
of
is a
it.
thick line. There is a highway between me and John Street. That is a definite line. Like, holy crap, man, that guy sucks. So yeah, but all that is to say that the reason that I think recovering from religion and the secular therapy project and the clergy project, like, they're so super important, is that there are so many Christian indoctrination mills that create these counseling places that have the artifice of legitimacy so that they can utilize the opportunity to continue to indoctrinate and damage you to keep you in
It's
the
almost
fold.
like a crisis pregnancy center, because it feels like real counseling until you get deep enough into it to be in trouble.
100%, exactly. That's a great analogy. That's because that's functionally what they do. So it's so difficult because a lot of people just don't know where to start when it comes to looking for a therapist. That's not to say that there aren't therapists of all religions and none who are amazing at their job and do it the appropriate way. But the Secular Therapy Project is at least a good jumping off point, if not just to get the therapy from them, but to get lists of therapists that are safe and respect that you are either a deconvert or a deconstructor or an atheist or an agnostic, and not attempt to thrust an agenda on you, and to actually work you through mental health counseling and self-care and get you better, because it's hard to traverse that, especially in the States, man. Like, that system is bananas. So it's I can think of nothing better to put forth than the Secular Therapy Project and everything that recovering from religion has to offer.
Yeah, well, great organization. I definitely encourage people to check out recoveringfromreligion.org. But on a more human level, do you have any guideposts or just bits of advice for how to navigate these waters?
Oh God. Try to be the best version of yourself, I think. Figure out what your motivations are and stick to your principles. Carefully analyze that whatever goal you have is aligning with the actions that you take, and be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Know that if you falter or if you make a wrong decision, then that's not you being awful. That's you being human. That is the human condition, is making mistakes and figuring out how to do better. And there's people out there that care about you, and we care about you. And I hope you have a good holiday if I don't see you guys again.
Yeah, no, fair to say. And it is tricky this time of year. So I guess I just want to encourage everybody to take really good care of themselves and to be in community. And, that's definitely something that, this organization tries to offer, particularly this time of year. I guess I'll go ahead and kind of take us out for the night and encourage people to keep up with what's going on at the ACA. You can do that at our website, which is atheist-community.org. You can email this show specifically, sex@atheist-community.org, or email the ACA itself with TV at. And then if you are anywhere near the Austin area, if you're able to be anywhere near the Austin area, take the chance to be around other people who are as frustrated, who are as in need of connection as you are. Because starting on December 15th, you can catch me and Jamie Boone live in the studio. The very next day, Truth Wanted is going to have Objectively Dan and Jason Friedman. And then Sunday, 12/18, Student Dr. Ben is going to be in town. He's on Talk Heathen with Dan and AXP with Jim Barrows. Come join us in person. It has been a really great new tradition to be having those live shows. Shannon, we got to get you a plane ride down here.
Yes, please. Once my schedule is not bananas with, all of the soccer practices, I desperately want to get down there again. I've never hosted AXP, for example, live in the studio. I've hosted Talk Heathen there, but I've never hosted live in the studio. And even if I don't come down to host, I would love to just come and hang out with you
I was
guys.
gonna say,
and be
yeah, if
back
you're
at the
in this zip
ACA
code,
again.
I'm gonna need to get a beer with you at
Have
some
a
point.
drink for sure. Absolutely. Imbibe a beverage.
Mhm.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, if folks want to check out any of the shows we just mentioned, you can do that at tiny.cc/AEN podcast. It's the one-stop shop for an audio-only version of each of these shows. And I keep talking about community. I'll remind people quickly about the Secular Sexuality Facebook fan group where people are joining to have these types of conversations, joining to share around some of these challenges. You can also do that at tiny.cc/ACD Discord, the atheist community of Discord. And finally, I've got an important announcement I'm going to make sure to read very carefully right off the screen here because this is just too good. By now, I think that folks know that the Secular Sexuality store is up and running again. We've been featuring a special limited time item each month. We also realize that many of you may have missed out on some of the great items we've offered. So for the month of December only, we are opening up the ACA merchandise vault, giving you limited time access to all of our special designs from the past year. Visit tiny.cc/the ACA vault to see all of those past offerings. And we're going to let you save 10% off of your entire purchase by using the discount code THEVAULT. But remember, when the year ends, so does this special offer. So make sure to come by and check out this blowout special. I honestly was reading all of that copy thinking to myself, shit, don't forget, shit, don't forget, shit, don't forget, because it was a great shirt we put out a couple of months ago. I didn't get a chance to grab one, so it'll probably be on the wall behind me here in a few months.
Like the edging shirt.
Yeah.
Be the porn you want to see in the world is probably
That's the one. I'm just so deeply proud to have that in my possession. I'll be putting it in my cart very soon.
Like, okay, shirt, if you say so. If I must.
But with all that, I want to take a moment to thank our incredible crew, the folks that you see on your screen now, as well as all of the moderators, all of the different volunteers, the board members, the folks that make this work. Thank you all so much for taking care of us today. And before we walk out the door, Shannon, were there any sort of final thoughts that you want to leave the audience with tonight?
Love you all. Have a happy holiday.
Mhm.
Elevate the discourse.
Elevate the discourse. Pour yourself some eggnog, watch a really great movie, and give yourself a big old orgasm. Or,
Yeah!
better yet, you can give somebody else one.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.